This week on Gymwright Live, we interview fitness entrepreneur Jeff Thornton to learn how to set up and start your very own podcast and have it actually get traction. Now, for all of you listening to this via our podcast, be sure to head over to facebook.com/Gymwright to check out the video version of this interview. Now, if you are watching the show right now and you do not see the little red light in the top corner of the screen, then you're watching the replay. So the first thing I want you to do is type the word join in the comments below so you can get access to the network. This is our free private Facebook group for all the motivated gym owners in the world, where you're going to find tons of great conversations, interviews. Plus, it'll set you up to receive a weekly reminder whenever we go live for this show, so you never miss an episode. Again, just type the word join now so you can get access to all this great stuff, so you can start taking your gym owner game to the next level right now. All right, let's get this party started. Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Gymwright Live. I'm your host, Marcus Gursey, and with me today we have the one and only Mr. Jeff Thornton. Jeff is the host of Feed Me, Fuel Me podcast, or co-host with our boy Michael Anders. He is the man behind Landoline and lots of other really interesting projects. So pumped to have you on, Jeff. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, thanks for having me on, Marcus. Appreciate you, man.
It is my pleasure. Been looking forward to this. And today we're going to be getting into how the heck to start a podcast like this, or better, hopefully better, and much more like what you guys have going on, and how to do it correctly. There's quite a bit that goes into it, and we want to make sure that people have a step-by-step how-to. So even whether you've got a huge facility and you want to go beyond your four walls, or a tiny facility in the middle of nowhere and you have a story to tell, podcasting is a really powerful way to build the brand and get your voice out there. So I'm excited to jump into it with you today.
Yeah, I am as well. And like I said, thanks for having me on the show. I really appreciate you, man. Love everything that you're doing, both you and Jess, and it's an honor to be here. So thank you so much, brother.
Awesome, man. Awesome. Now, before we get into the kind of step-by-step how-to we've worked out here for today, tell us a little bit about yourself. What's your story, Jeff?
Absolutely, man. So I'm just a small-town kid born and raised in Alamogordo, New Mexico, small city. Grew up, went through the entire school system, played football my entire life, and then branched off and started a tech consulting company. So I have a background in computer science and mathematics. So I was sort of like a techie, nerdy guy, but still an athlete at the same time. I finished that path and discovered that fitness was a passion of mine in college when I went through a transformation of losing 60 pounds. Well, I was 260 pounds and dropped to 185. So that's when I discovered that I love the athletic side of things, but I really love the fitness side even more, like working out, training, and pushing myself and discovering new levels to where I want to be. So that led me into where I am now, from leaving the tech industry and going into starting Land of Lean, my company. We're currently developing supplement products for sports nutrition, and then we'll expand that out as we go. But, man, just love everything that's happening in fitness. I did CrossFit for a little bit, and just like I said, love pushing my body, man. So
awesome.
That's what got me here today.
Now, you've been an entrepreneur since you were a young man. I remember reading in your bio, you started off when you were in like junior high school with like wax skateboard decks, and like then on the road with your brother who was a DJ. I mean, you've had a hell of a journey, man. You've been kind of fending for yourself and experimenting. I mean, even the consulting stuff you were talking about, you had actually, I think, started with a tech company, like working for someone, then actually branched off and started your own, right?
Absolutely, yeah, man. So I've been toying with entrepreneurship. I was more entrepreneurial, I would say, from that junior high stage through college, where I was getting my hands in a lot of different things and learning the ins and outs of business. Like you mentioned, start the wax company with a friend, then was sort of like the shadow for my brother with his mobile DJ company. So I learned a lot about business and what it takes to really grow a company. And then, as you mentioned, from my experience of graduating school in computer science, I went to work for SAP, which is a large ERP, which is enterprise resource planning software company in the world. And then I just saw what I was doing. I was so niched. I became one of 4 developers in the world, and I became the top in the world developer-wise on that software, which was environmental health and safety. And I said, I see what I'm getting paid here, and I see what I'm getting billed at for on these the statement of work. And I said, I can go do this myself and pull the same type of clientele, and decided to go ahead and do that. And it's been a ride ever since, man. That was the end of 2014, and here we are.
Awesome, man. Good for you.
I appreciate you, brother.
All right. So let's jump into this podcast thing. So you and I both know that creating a podcast and putting your message out in audio only format, or even including video with it like we do here, can be extremely powerful.
Right.
But could you explain to our audience some of the benefits of having your own podcast?
Man, where do you start with this one, I say? Because podcasting, before I started, it was just something where it felt like an impossible task. You see these big time names, you think of like a Lewis Howes or those like a Joe Rogan, and you see them doing it and you're like, how can they achieve this? And it looks impossible, but it's actually really simple to start. You know, you don't have to have all the complex equipment, but one of the biggest things that I've learned from it is the networking aspect of podcasting. You get to meet incredible minds. Think if you want to have a person on your show and you get to discuss ideas with them for free, and just having that hour conversation where there's no such thing as a stupid question, and you can just get your answers, your problems solved on the show just by talking to someone, and you can just build up that relationship and that network with them. And that's one of the biggest things that I've noticed from it. And aside just from the networking piece, you can reach an audience that you didn't even imagine, because you may not have the scale starting off where you're thinking like these massive podcasts to get millions of listeners a month, but that tribe is really going to gravitate towards your message. So if you have friends and family that start listening to it, then the message starts expanding and you start attracting the community and audience that wants to hear your show, and then you become sort of like a thought leader and influencer in that space. And it's just an incredible way to, you know, expand outside your four walls, like we were talking about a little bit earlier. And so just the opportunities that present itself from your show, it may start off little by little where you don't have a lot of traffic, but then it just starts essentially just hockey sticking, man. And it's just the amount of people you run across, the connects. I mean, that's the two biggest things I could say that I've gotten from podcasting so far, and that anybody can experience.
100%. And, you know, I think there's a lot of value in building your brand, your own brand, right? Like you said, it kind of positioning yourself as a thought leader and all that. Oftentimes people don't really expect that from doing that, but because you're the one interviewing other people, right? It just repositions you into a new light that is pretty difficult to achieve outside of that, right? And podcasting, I think by default puts you into that role very quickly, and you can really build a meaningful brand and tell your story and you know, make your impact, and that can have all sorts of great benefits. So, okay, so let's jump in here. So let's start with equipment. What types of equipment would someone need to get started, and what experience levels even needed to work all of it?
You know, to get started, you don't need much. You can pick up your cell phone, hook your headset into that, and record. I mean, it's just as simple as tracking that conversation while you're walking around the gym. You could be coaching a class, and you may have nuggets that you're throwing out during a gym session. Why not turn your phone on record, have your headset in, and start capturing that audio from there? And what you can do from that starting point is take that audio, transfer it into your computer, and you can launch it into a hosting service like Libsyn, for instance. Libsyn's just a audio hosting service where you get your podcast out to different mediums, so Spotify and all of the iTunes and Google Play Store and all of that good stuff. So it can be as simple as just using your cell phone, and that's just the beginner stages. The next step, if you want to start getting really serious about it, you could have the mic set up. So there's a box you can buy. Obviously, the equipment setup's no more than $400, $500. You get one of these headsets, which is $200, a Scarlett Focusrite, which is a box you can buy on Amazon. It's just audio input. Turn on your system on your computer and start tracking that conversation. So that's like intermediate, advanced level. But yeah, it doesn't even have to be that professional starting off. Just getting the momentum going is going to be your biggest factor. Because when Durs and I started our podcast, it was a mess, man, because we were in the middle of Scottsdale, Arizona, triple-degree weather, and we had 3 cell phones sitting on front of us under misters at a coffee shop. But it was a total wreck. But it started getting our momentum going, and then people listened in on that episode, and we were scatterbrained. We didn't even have like a direct focused topic, but just the engagement and interaction that we had just from setting up 3 cell phones, doing Facebook Live, and starting from there and building to where we are now, 28 episodes in now. So
wow,
it doesn't have to be well thought out. It doesn't have to be the best equipment. It's just getting the action going, and we have the tools to get the podcast up and running. It can just be as simple as your cell phone or even just like a little audio recorder.
Right. It's really just about getting started at first. And
right.
I think that, when it comes to the tech side of things, people get pretty hung up thinking this is going to be this overly complex, like radio production. But the reality is, if you have a Mac, you have everything you need built into it. You can literally plug your headphones in, or even buying, jumping on Amazon and getting one of those Yeti mics for $100, $150. Plug that into the USB, record yourself on GarageBand, and you can sound as good as a lot of the shows that you listen to. As a matter of fact, having gone and been on different podcasts that I had followed for years, when I showed up, I'm like, this is what you're using? We're just plugged into your computer, and we're using this mic setup that's just a thing that I've seen on Amazon, and that was it. And it's really just about starting, and I think and we're going to get into like the flow and how to structure and all that stuff a little bit later in the show, but it's really not as daunting as I think people initially think that it has to be.
Absolutely. Yeah, you hit the nail on the head, man. It's like you go to different podcaster studios and you see, like you mentioned, the equipment setup, and what you envisioned in your mind, your perception is greater than the reality, so to speak.
For sure.
So it's like you said, it doesn't have to be this huge technical feat that you have to achieve. It's just something very simple, and you already have the tools to achieve it. So,
right on. So, okay, so you and your future podcast, right? So this is like kind of the starting point, right? Let's kind of go through your process here. Where do we want to begin?
First, when you're starting your show, you want to figure out your why. I know you hear that a lot in self-development books, but it's true. It's what's the reason you're starting this podcast? What's the audience that you're trying to reach? Because getting a clear, concise message that you can easily get across to your audience, where it's going to hook them initially starting out. So for instance, like when I started my show, or when Durs and I started our show, we started in the health and fitness space. We were like, we're talking about health and fitness topics. And that got really dry very quickly because it was like just piecing pieces together. Like, let's talk about macros, let's talk about this and that. So it didn't have a clear, focused message. But once we started getting dialed in, like we want to start reaching entrepreneurs, small businesses, and business professionals. And we want to talk about the mindset piece of things and understanding the perspective of the person behind the business, not just the business itself. That's when things started really growing, and we started seeing a lot of fuel going into what we were talking about. So fleshing out your why on exactly what you're trying to do and who the audience you're trying to attract, that would be the big first piece that I would start out with. And the next piece, once you have your why figured out, is what transformation do you want your audience to take after they hear an episode? So once the episode's done and finished, what actions can your audience take? Maybe it's maybe you have a downloadable, a call to action that they can go grab in your show notes. Maybe they can go to a book that you were talking about on the episode. Maybe reach out to somebody. Just clear, actionable steps that create a transformation to your audience that they can act on. It's really simple and clear in understanding. So I found that extremely helpful when you're starting your show is first finding your why, and then discovering the transformation you want your audience to take once they consumed your content.
Awesome. Okay. So speaking of content, let's talk about that next. So specifically, what are some ways people can structure the show? This is a question I think a lot of people, everyone I've ever spoken to has asked about podcasting. They're like, well, how do you structure this thing? And we had a flow that we did with Barbell Business, which taught me a lot about how we can structure this. We've kind of modified that since then for what we do here with Gymwright Live. Do you have any tips on where they can start, or structure-wise, where to begin?
Absolutely. So once you figured the first piece out, the next place I would go is figuring out the title of your show. So making that title really connect with the audience. So if you're in the health and fitness space, or you want to make, as a box owner, your community listen to it, if there's something like a subtitle that you use or a methodology that you use in your gym, you could structure your title around that to where your community is going to understand that concept first. I would start small to where it affects your immediate audience, so they can say, okay, I understand what our gym owner is trying to do, right? And so first piece would be the title. Then you would get the description of the show, exactly what you're going to be talking about on your show, so to speak. That's probably like the easiest part, is like fleshing that idea out, because you have everything structured from the beginning. And then the show type is, I think, the part where a lot of people might get confused is they'll have several show types, like a solo, a live show like we're doing now, maybe a mixed show where you're having a solo where you can be just talking to your audience about a single concept, or a mixed show, which is where you're interviewing another person, how we're doing now. So there's several ways you can structure your shows. So figuring out the type of show that you want to run, if it's interview style or if it's just you talking yourself, that's extremely helpful, is from, just trying to grow your brand. The next would be the show length. It depends how you want to run your show. You think of a Joe Rogan, he runs marathons. It's like 3-hour shows, and for a lot of owners, that's not really like a feasible concept to start. Mm-hmm. But if that's something you want to do, it's you have to just dial that piece in, or you just figure out the length and the sweet spot that's really going to affect your audience in a way to get them moving forward. The next, I would say, was the frequency of your show. When do you want it to come out? Is it a weekly show, daily, bi-weekly, monthly? Getting that concept across to your audience of when this show and when they can start consuming this is going to be extremely helpful, because the consistency that you create with that show is going to allow your audience to be able to dial in. So every time they wake up on Thursday, they know your show is coming out. So you're going to be the first one they consume and listen to and get those ideas from. Mm-hmm. So those would be the best pieces I start out with first, as far as like the structure of like getting your show ready. Mm-hmm. And then when you're into the actual show of like the recording process, figuring out exactly how you want the beginning, the middle, and the end of the show to be about. So dialing in your introduction, getting that message across, like, hey, today's show is about X, Y, and Z, and this is what we're going to be talking about. Then cue your intro music, whatever that is. Start the interview process, which is going to be your middle piece, and then doing the post, which is that call to action where you can say, okay, if you enjoyed this episode and you want to hear more about it, go view our show notes. Go download this action sheet where you can, consume the concepts that we talked about. And so getting those pieces dialed in from an editing and recording process, because once you have that idea of that guest or that topic that you have in mind, that structure is going to have a clear direction so your audience can understand exactly what actions need to be taken once that process is complete.
Yeah, we actually learned this from Mike back on Barbell Business, but the structure that we used to follow was why, what, how. Okay. And I think that when even just following that basic flow of saying, okay, well, why is what we're talking about today important? Mm-hmm. What is it exactly? Let's break it up a little bit. All right, now how can you implement it, or how, whatever is the actionable element of it, right, I like that. Is a really easy way to start. Because what it does is initially with the why, it kind of sells the rest of the show, right? Kind of hooks people, gets them engaged, and makes them get in the groove. Then what is it? Now you're breaking it up and starting to get a little bit more detailed. It's starting to kind of fill the whole picture in, and obviously everyone's waiting for the actionable piece at the end. Right. And just following that, I think for a lot of people is a really good starting point.
Absolutely, I agree, and I really like that concept that you mentioned. Why, what, how? That's very simple to remember, and it's like, if you're having a specific person on, people are complex and they have a lot of great ideas, but pick out a specific topic that you want to address with this person. You may talk about everything else they're doing, but if you have that simple concept of that idea that you want to discuss with that individual on the show, and it makes things flow a lot easier and makes the conversation flow more transparent. It makes it easier to just have that natural conversation instead of forcing different ideas where people can get, scatterbrained and figure out, like, lose, exactly what the point you're trying to get across.
Yeah. Okay. So let's talk about now, like, planning your podcast episodes. And because we're going to talk about like how to actually like launch a podcast, right? So kind of the step by step, there's actually a formula for getting it off the ground and making sure you get on iTunes and you get some good visibility and all that sort of stuff. So now that we figured out, who our audience is, we figured out our why, we figured out who our audience is, we've gone through like the kind of the technical title of the show, description, show notes. We have the actual flow. Where do we begin if we actually want to start a podcast now? Like what's the step by step?
Okay, so once you've decided how you want to do your podcast, solo, interview style, mixed, whatever have you, start brainstorming the people that you want to have on your show. You usually start with a list of 10 to 15, guest list that we call like our wish list. And then from that wish list, you just start figuring out how to contact those people. And once you start getting in contact with them, scheduling those days and having those conversations is going to be your biggest thing. So I think starting out, we didn't do it well. And so my best advice would be to batch your episodes starting out, especially when you're first launching your show. Mm-hmm. If you can shoot your own solo show to start out like a 0 episode and say, boom, this is the idea of the podcast, this is what we're going to start with. Then episode 1 could start from the guest on, and you could mix and match your solos to interview styles in there. But batching your episodes is going to save you a lot of time, because what you can do is, like, when you first launch your episode to gain that traffic, you can release those 5 episodes at a single time so people can get the idea of what it is and listen through the content and say, okay, I really enjoy this stuff. So batching is going to be the biggest thing once you have that. The next piece I would do was like brainstorming the concepts or the call to actions that you're looking for each of those episodes. So 5 to 10 call to actions, and you can mix and match those CTAs throughout those shows that you already have structured. Once that's like dialed in, it makes it a little bit easier, because if you're filming and just posting weekly, you can sort of feel like you're in the rat race. But giving yourself that cushion to release those episodes at like a structured timeline that you have set, it just creates less confusion going on the process. So instead of just always trying to catch up from week to week and have a new guest on and all of that stuff. And what else would you think on that, brother?
I think the batching is huge, because especially when you're getting started, it's going to allow you to kind of do your first run and then sit back and really watch and engage with people and focus on promoting as they're going out. And right. At the same time, then you can say, okay, now what did I learn from that first batch? Go through your second round. I mean, I've done it both ways, and both have their pros and cons. Where I think doing it every week, like we record live every week, so I can't batch, right? This is always done in real time on Fridays at 10 o'clock. Yeah. But we batch the prep work, right? So we're gonna map out. We have our plan, months in advance of who we're going to have on, what we're going to be talking about, and how that plays into our overall, content strategy and what we're trying to focus on for gym owners at this part of the year. And, but so we do the heavy lifting, the hard part, which is what that is, booking and arranging and prepping and all that ahead of time. So that way we can just show up every week. But I think when you're first getting started, especially if you're trying to launch on iTunes and make sure you get some visibility, I know that that's a big part of it, actually, is having like rapid fire episodes and, starting with strong episodes and all that is very beneficial. It's actually kind of part of the whole like launch strategy, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, you're absolutely right. And what I found is with the initial launch, it's like you want to have that community support you, like a launch party, so to speak. So if you have those 10 episodes, I would say minimum 10 episodes to start. But on that initial launch day, you release 5 of those 10 episodes. So those 5 launch on that launch day, because it gives your audience a great idea of, the trend of your podcast. And what it's going to do, it's going to uptick your rankings within iTunes, because when somebody subscribes to your show, iTunes is automatically going to download those 5 shows. So just by happenstance of throwing that launch party and somebody subscribing to your show, your numbers are going to go skyrocket. So you have a better chance of ranking within iTunes on your launch. So that's like a hacking strategy to get your name out there a lot faster. But that's just going to, fuel up your start and get you off like to really great momentum is when you first launch your show. And that's just something like I didn't do initially starting out, but going forward, like if I were to launch another show, it'd be 5 episodes to start, just to get your name in that algorithm and start ranking on those keywords that you have for your show within iTunes, I would say.
And why is it important to rank on iTunes? Why would someone want to go through the work and rather than just kind of shooting from the hip right out of the gate.
Yeah, it's about being discovered. If you feel your message and everybody's message, you have something to get across, and people deserve to hear your message. You have an important voice that needs to be heard. So you want to be able to have your show picked up by people, because your message is going to transform somebody's life, whether you believe it or not. And they're going to start listening to your content and become raving fans of yours. So getting yourself up there is not only going to just help you, but essentially you're helping others. You're helping others get out the way. Maybe they want to do something and starting a gym or starting their own show or do whatever it may be. Your message could be that one that just touches them. And that's why it's just important to start ranking initially. It's one of the big things you can do for yourself. And if you're going to, in my mind, if you're going to take on any endeavor like starting a podcast, why not try to be the best you can? And you deserve to be the best you can in anything that you do.
I love it, man. Good message.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So now that we have, we've mapped out our first, let's say 5 or 10 shows, we've lined up our guests or, versus solo shows, whatever it is. We've got our agenda. We've got our CTAs laid out. Now, what would you say to those people who, are like, okay, I've done the prep work, but now I'm really scared about actually, like, I'm getting nervous to, I don't want to screw this thing up. Or even just using the technical equipment, right? That aspect of it. What would you say to people to help them feel a little bit more comfortable about starting?
Oh, that's a really good question, man. I would say have fun with it. It's your show, and you can run it the way you want to run it, because you may have this idea of, like, I want to look exactly like these big shows that I'm watching, and that's a great, it's a great feat to achieve, but it's your voice, it's your message getting out there. So, like, whatever you want to say or how you want to say it, go ahead and do it that way. Just figure out the lane that you want to go, and don't try to follow anybody else. That's the biggest thing I saw starting out, is that you may feel like there's a certain way that you have to podcast or that you need to podcast for people to listen. But once you start finding your voice, and it took me a long time to find my podcasting voice, because I would watch all these other people doing it, and I would try their style, and it didn't work, because that's not who I am. That's not the core of my being. So find out who you are and what you want to talk about, and it's just going to make it easier. If you find your lane and you run with it, man, and that's the biggest thing I would say, to get out of your own way. Like, don't try to do it the way anybody else wants to do it. Do it your style and run the show the best way you know how, because it's super simple. So we all have amazing conversations with great people every single day, and that's how you have to have that mindset of, like, I get to talk and learn from this person sitting right across from me. What is it that they can teach me? And then just from being sort of like, it's a selfless type of endeavor. The selfishness is where you can selfishly, you're learning and getting all the ideas and thoughts that you want to learn from this person, and then selflessly you're giving back by putting your message out there to a broader audience with the iTunes or, like, the podcasting platform. So yeah, just getting that momentum going and getting the train rolling in that direction.
Okay. So we hit record, we knock out our few first shows. Now what? Mm-hmm. There's a whole process in getting set up with iTunes or Libsyn and, prepping the audio file for the world. Like, what's the next order of operations?
Okay. So you finish your episode, first part. Then that's more of the technical aspect kicks in. That's when you start structuring we talked about earlier, the introduction, where you can shoot the piece of who's going to be on this episode. Now if you have music on your show, laying that in as like a textured layer to your episode that goes into, what the show's about, then dropping in on like a GarageBand, Final Cut Pro. Adobe's good if you're on Windows, the Adobe Suite software, you can do the audio recording. But structuring your episode layout, the intro, the middle, and the outro. And then once you export that audio, it's going to come in an MP3 file would be the best one. File to upload on those hosting sites. What I do is once it's exported, I drag it in. If you're a Mac user, I drag it into my iTunes, and then I do the back-end tagging. So it's like ID3 tagging is what it's known as, and it's basically getting who produced the show, what's the show is about, the name, and everything, podcast, artwork, and all that stuff.
Right.
And so that tagging is going to help you within the SEO, which is search engine optimization. It's going to help you on the podcasting once it's uploaded on iTunes and everything. So once you have that MP3 file tagged, you would then go into your hosting site, which would be Libsyn, SoundCloud, Blueberry. Those are just to name a few. I would say if you're going to start, Libsyn's the best route to go. And when you upload that MP3 file to Libsyn, all those tags are going to be pulled up from that direct upload. So all the the pre-work of doing the tagging, once it's uploading, Libsyn's already picking that all the back-end details up and tagging everything that you need, so you're good to go from there. Then you could set your schedule on when you want it to launch, have all your show note details ready to rock, and then schedule the post to go. Then once that post is ready to go, you know what day it's launching. The next best thing is getting the blog ready. So where are people going to go to after they listen to your episode? They're listening to the content, the audio, the video, whatever have you, and then you want to lead them to the website where they can get more information about the guest. Maybe you have PDFs, downloadables. Maybe there's extra content that you have within your show notes. So getting all of that prepared and ready to launch simultaneously with the audio is the next step I would do from that technical side of getting the show ready. And as you talked about a little bit earlier, marketing is going to be your biggest thing that you have to worry about once all of that, the post recording or the post editing is done. And so if you have an email list, you can structure that out. If it's Facebook ads, if it's just calling a friend, whatever have you, getting that marketing piece dialed in and getting your message out there to when the show is going to launch is going to give you a lot of leverage when the episode is live and ready to rock. So
awesome. Now, what would be some advice? Like if you were going to launch right now, you were launching a brand new show, what would you do, Jeff, to promote it and make sure it got maximum visibility if you were going to launch a brand new show right now? As far as the marketing is concerned, right? So we've got the podcast loaded up, it's ready to fire, show drops, whatever, next week. What would you be doing specifically to help get maximum visibility?
That's a great question. So I think the first thing I would do, I would set up a launch party. I would invite friends, community. It doesn't have to be an in-live launch party. It could be a Facebook group where I invite all of these people into this group and say, okay, here's the podcast. We're launching on whatever the day is. And then I would build up that flow from that Facebook group and just give them hints of who's coming on, what's going to be dropping. I think building up that excitement and getting people in your corner, for me, would be like the best advantage I would take advantage of. The next big thing I would do it would have to be Facebook marketing. I mean, paid advertising, for me, I've seen just huge strides within growing our podcast, Feed Me, Fuel Me, is getting that paid advertising campaign behind and really directing that message toward the audience that you want to get. So if you are in the fitness community and you own a box owner in, Scottsdale, Arizona, for instance, I would target every box owner, every fitness personality, whatever, in that Scottsdale area or your location market. And then I would get that message out there where it's having teaser videos, having, pictures, anything that you can get from a marketing standpoint of getting visibility to that episode. So that's what I would do is first build up the community for a launch party, let them know the date that it's going to be dropping, because it sort of creates an incentive too that you don't have to, that you have to follow through at that point. So it keeps that, you know what I mean? And then I would set up my Facebook marketing. Those would be the two biggest pieces that I would do. And then aside from getting those, the launch setup, the ad setup, I would create all of the assets essentially for that brand. So if it's getting the Facebook pages up, the Instagram pages, everything, social media, website, getting all of that live and looking professional, because the first time somebody lands on your content, your page, you want it to have the best appeal that it does from that first impression. And just having just a simple Wix site. It doesn't have to be like a complex WordPress site or anything like that. Just setting something up to where it gives a professional view of your brand is going to be extremely massive. So that's where I would go if I were launching my podcast, would be those three pillars first. And then Yeah, man, those would be the biggest places I focus on for sure.
Now, about the Facebook advertising aspect, would you be promoting the individual shows as they're dropping? Would you just be doing something general for the podcast brand itself? What would you do?
The first one, I would do a general post about what the show is about. So it would be a quick 15 to 30 second video, or maybe 15 to 60 second video, for instance, where I'm talking about the mission of this podcast, where I'm sitting there live. I like being in front of the cameras. I would be talking in front of the camera, showing cool action of like, this is who's going to be on the show, this, and this. And then when that first episode comes out, then I start getting specific towards that individual guest, getting their message out there. Like, okay, today we're having Marcus on our podcast. This is exactly what we're talking about. And since you've already done the pre-work of setting that episode up, you could tease out some high points in that episode. So if you said something amazing on the show, and I feel like the audience would get a lot of value out of it, I would pull that one piece of content out, however long it is, and then that would be a branding piece that I would use to where it would start that idea of like, whoa, I want to hear more in depth about the entire conversation. And so having that micro content ready to rock when shows are launching, setting up to that, if it's launching Thursday, Sunday I would start pushing that one message, that note that you said on an episode. Then I would drop like a video ad, then a picture ad, or then a quote from the episode. And so just giving different types of content so that if somebody's a visual, learner, they're going to like the visual piece. If somebody likes reading, if somebody likes the picture, switching up that content so if you can start really attracting the audience that you want for your show. And so initially it'd just be general before, and then once an episode is there, it would be structured towards that specific guest.
Awesome. Love it. Okay. So now we've got it launched. We held our launch party. We're running our ads. We're up and running. Do you have any other tips for people as far as what else they can do to help grow their podcast or become a better podcaster once they're up and running?
Absolutely. If you're more into not really into the technical side, I'm a huge guy on learning the ins and outs of the business from, the technical down to the functional process, which is like the business side of everything. I like knowing the entire picture. So starting off your show initially, I would get my hands dirty and learning all the pieces of the show, like cutting up the episode, recording, learning how to launch it yourself on iTunes, doing all of those aspects, because if you want to, you can either continue going down that route where you're doing it weekly, or if you're going to outsource that process, you can at least start recording exactly how you did it, so you can outsource it to somebody that can follow your standard operating procedures and get that done if that's not something that you would like doing. But yeah, that would be the biggest thing, is like deciding exactly how you want your show structured, and then deciding whether you want to do it yourself weekly or hand it off to somebody. And if you decide to hand it off, getting an operating procedure in place to where it's easy to understand, easily communicatable to, your outsourced or your person, and then getting your show up live every single week. But making sure to stay consistent in that process is going to be huge, because, the mass majority, 93% of podcasts are dead on the iTunes store or on iTunes.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, 93% are dead. They're not live because it's one of those things. If you're not keeping the momentum flowing, you lose interest in it. So that would be my big thing. Keep learning it. Figure out how you want to do it, whether you're going to do it yourself or whether you're going to outsource it, and then just keep that momentum flowing, man. But from the marketing side of things, I would say just capture that initial audience. Start small, family and friends, because they're going to latch onto the idea. They're going to be your first fans that really, consume what you're putting out. And then as you start broadening your audience, figure out, don't try to capture the entire market, capture, a specific subset. So pick an avatar, a male and a female avatar, like, oh, this is Johnny. He's 43. He likes working out at CrossFit. He works at a normal job, and do it for the same for your female, Jane, entrepreneur. And once you have those two avatars set up, you would know the identity of your show. And then every show that you put out, you would know that you're targeting, these two avatars, and it's going to make it, your message is more clear and concise as you start moving forward. And that's when you can start really getting some mass appeal.
And I find that actually the identifying who your avatars are, or your brand hero or your ideal client, it's the same exercise, right? We do the same thing when we're trying to sell and market any product. We do this with our gym owner clients. And I think it's so important to have those established when you start creating content like this, because you know what angle you're coming from and who you're explaining it to. So rather than looking at, the interview as like, man, this has to make sense for everyone, forget everyone. Focus on those couple of people that you are trying to help or serve with whatever it is that your message is, and try to make them real people, even if you can. If you know, hey, I'm talking to, Steve and Jessica those are my people. These are people who I'm comfortable talking to. I know how I would explain it. I know the kind of jokes that they would get, the examples I would use to illustrate a point, so that it's more natural for you. And that's going to make it feel more authentic. And it's a lot easier for you to do so if you're talking to two people that you know and trust, and that you know that they like what you have to tell, right? You know that you're helpful. They need your help. So it makes you more confident, I think, in your presentation overall, rather than looking into a camera or looking at your microphone and thinking as this like uber generalist, right? Same thing with marketing. Marketing is borderline impossible if you're trying to serve everyone, right? Good marketing is first starts with identifying who your ideal client is, so that you can be laser specific on what's our messaging, how are we going to knock it out of the park for this person, and just really speak to a smaller segment, and so that your message is really heard and felt, rather than kind of resonating with everyone. Kind of resonating with everyone sucks, because no one really cares then, right? I'd rather really resonate with a specific type of person where there's going to be raving fans on the other end, right? And so it makes it easier to do the show. It makes and obviously it's going to get more traction more quickly, because you're actually speaking to a very specific type of person, rather than, again, trying to kind of sort of please everyone.
Absolutely. Yeah, you hit the nail on the head, Marcus. I mean, that's the biggest thing. We want to sort of drink from the fire hose all at once, or, like swallow the ocean. But it's like you said, you start with the niche and you build that subset out, and it can turn to something extremely massive. And, I helped a buddy of mine who's a box owner in Albuquerque, New Mexico, start his podcast up. And, just an idea for box owners out there, starting out your show, if you want to do member highlights every week, where you're bringing in members from your box and you talk to them on the show about, what they're getting out of this experience, why they joined your box, those can be, starter episodes for you, because you already have your audience there.
Right.
And if you have a community that's, that you're bringing onto your show, they're going to listen to it, because people want to get their message out there, and they deserve to get their message out there. And you're being the vehicle to put your gym on a higher platform and understand, like, why my coaches are doing this, why my community is doing this, how I built this incredible gym and box. That's just the easy way to start as a box owner. You already have the people there.
100%.
Why not interview them and do member highlights every single week until, you want to start talking to, maybe you want to talk to other gym owners, other people outside of out of your community. But that's a good place to start.
Yeah, and for box owners, I think people think, well, what's so valuable about that? A lot. So for one, you're going to make people feel special by being on the podcast. Well, what happens when someone's on a podcast for their first time? They're going to tell all their friends and family and coworkers, hey, check me out, I was on this podcast. Well, guess what? Now their story, their success story, is being seen or heard by everyone in their circle of influence. Right. Which, what does that generate? Referrals. That generates visibility for you as a gym by simply doing these interviews on an interesting platform like podcasting, right? It's going to make people feel that much more special. You have access to their friends and family in a different way, right? It's not like you're asking for the referral. Instead, interview them about their success story and their journey, before you started with us and when you got started, what were your fears? I mean, literally like long form testimonial style, and just telling their story is going to make them feel awesome. It's going to allow their story to resonate with the rest of your community, which is going to make them all get to know each other better, because they're going to learn about each other's stories and backgrounds, when it's maybe someone they just, have class with every now and again. And it's such an incredible way to build your business. And it's as simple as, flip on, the basic stock recording GarageBand software and a $100 microphone or pair of microphones from Amazon at your gym and get to work.
Absolutely. Yeah. You hit the nail on the head. It's extremely simple. It doesn't have to be, this massive undertaking that you do. And, I've told a lot of people, if you're going to start a show, if you have a video camera, you have your phone or whatever, if you don't want to use the video from that episode or that conversation, just bring it into some software, just grab the audio, and that's your podcast. You don't even have to have your face or video out there to start, but any way to capture that audio and that conversation, and your podcast is live and ready to go, And the biggest thing I've seen on podcasting is no matter how great and clear a video looks, if you're doing the video format, is as you start growing, you want to start investing in high quality audio equipment because 100%. The bounce rate, so to speak, from bad audio to good audio is exponential. If the audio is terrible, people won't want to listen to it. They'll watch bad video, but as long as the audio is great, they can sit there through it. But if the audio is bad, people are just going to completely bounce out of your show. So make sure the quality of your audio is really good as well. So our cell phones pick it up if you're going to use headsets, but that'd be as you start growing, start thinking about that, and that's just going to really make your brand stand out above the rest and make people, raving fans and just consume your content at a higher rate.
Awesome, man. Well, thank you for walking us through that entire process, man. That's been extremely helpful, and I hope that people watching or listening to this can take what you brought to the show today and help roll out their first podcast. Final question for you. In one sentence, if you could give one piece of advice to a gym owner, what would it be?
Oh, man, I would say, for a starting podcast standpoint, would you say?
Hey, up to you. If you could give any piece of advice to a gym owner, what's it going to be?
Let's see, man. I would say from the podcast front is a big thing I learned from a book I read, The Mask of Masculinity, is be a guest on your own show. It opens you to plenty concepts and ideas from the person sitting across from you. You're having this person on your platform for a reason. So instead of letting your ego get in the way of, I know all this information, be the guest on your own show and learn all the concepts of this person sitting across from you. And it goes from anything that you're doing in business. You're going to learn from that community, from that person, and you're going to have just a clear direction of where to go from there. So that would be my biggest thing is, humble yourself and just be the guest on your own show is what I would say. Awesome, man. Thank you very much, Jeff. Where can people find more about you? Yeah, you can connect with me. My podcast is Feed Me, Fuel Me. We drop episodes every Thursday. Land of Lean, we're launching our supplement line here in the next few weeks. So you can connect with me there. And if you need to contact me personally, you need any more tips or advice, go to Jeff or hit me up at jeff@jeffreythornton.com. And that's JEFFREY Thornton, THORNTON. And I also made, I'm sure you put it in the notes, but from this conversation, I made a PDF where they can download and go through the checklist of, pre-recording through post-recording. And when the show goes live, man, or the course goes live, they can, get a little bit deeper inside of like exactly the process of building a podcast out, all the technical and functional aspects of that. Yeah, thank you for putting that together. Again, visit jeffreythornton.com/Gymwright. And you'll be able to get the free download with the PDF. Thanks for putting that together for our viewers. Jeff, thanks for being on the show today, man. Always such a pleasure rapping with you, man. Hey, same with you, Marcus. Thanks for having me on. And if you guys need anything, feel free to hit me up anytime. I'm here to help. So much love. I really appreciate and love everything that you're doing out there, brother, both you and Jess. So thank you both for having me on. It's been an honor. Absolutely. And I want to thank all of you motivated gym owners out there for joining us today as well. Again, if you are listening to this via podcast, be sure to check out the video version of this interview at facebook.com/Gymwright. And if you're enjoying the show, leave us a 5-star rating and written review. Your support means the world to us. Also, if you want to get in on the network and get access to our 2019 Gym Sales and Marketing Planner, our live Q&As that we do every week, simply type the word join in the comments below and it'll get you immediate access. All right, we'll look forward to seeing you guys all again next week. Now get out there and build something that matters. We'll see you.